Hi, this is Jeff Anderson from the International Society of Close Quarter Combatants. What you're about to experience in this DVD is most likely unlike anything you've ever experienced before when it comes to firearms training. You see, this DVD is not about getting all of your shots into a 1-inch shot group. It's not about a Starsky and Hutch dive over your hood and shooting between your legs to take out the bad guys. There's more than enough courses out there to help you with your firearms shooting tactics. What this is about is potentially something even more important. It's about what happens after a lethal encounter. It's about keeping you out of prison just for protecting yourself and those that you love. In fact, what if I told you that just watching this DVD from the very beginning to the very end will greatly increase your chances of staying out of prison just by the mere fact of what you know that's in this DVD. You see, the legal system is not about justice. It's about the law. And the law is instituted and carried out by human beings. And by our very nature, human beings are imperfect. We make mistakes. Juries make mistakes. You do not have to have committed a crime in order to go to prison for that crime. Now, what we're going to talk about over the course of this DVD is about the things that's going to help keep you out of that legal situation where you might have to go to prison for the acts that you took. Now, to help us achieve this goal, I traveled to Colorado to the Ramcat training facility to meet up with my good friend Peyton Quinn. Now, Peyton Quinn is a longtime one of our featured network instructors for the ISCQC. And Peyton has been a legend within not only the reality-based martial arts world, but also in the firearms training and working with criminals and the legal system as well. Now, Peyton has over 25 years of experience in reality-based training, as well as just working with the legal system as an expert and the research that he's done that most people have never even heard of before or even thought of. Now, what we're going to be talking about here is his experience when it comes to working with criminals and the legal system. He's got some, shall we say, controversial viewpoints in some cases, which could potentially even piss off a lot of the people that are going to be watching this DVD, and that's okay. I just want you to watch this from beginning to end and absorb the information as best as possible, because this is truly going to change your perspective on how you use a firearm to defend yourself. Peyton, if you're ready, I'm ready to get started.
Self-defense is man's oldest law, but the law is instituted by human beings who are fallible and have their own prejudices. Juries are not impartial. Many studies have shown that quite conclusively, but the ultimate proof is talk to an experienced defense attorney. He will tell you that half the battle is won or lost through jury selection alone. So obviously, the district attorney doesn't want people on there who he thinks might not find you guilty, and the defense attorney wants people in there who are not prejudiced against you. For example, say a person's in a DUI case, vehicular homicide. Your defense attorney is certainly going to see that nobody on that jury had a loved one killed by a drunk driver. Secondly, the district attorney, he's not really allowed to consider or decide your guilt or innocence. That's not his job. That job is exclusively for the jury. His only job is to determine if he can successfully prosecute you and convict you. That's the only measure of his job performance, the number of indictments versus the number of convictions. This involves the plea bargain system. If he doesn't think he really has enough evidence, or he suspects he may not have enough evidence to convict you in front of a jury, he will offer you a plea bargain where you plead to a lesser crime, which still may be a felony. And if you're convicted of a felony, you can legally never own a firearm again. If I'm not guilty, I will not take a plea bargain for a felony. If I acted in my legitimate self-defense, I will force the district attorney to prove that to a jury. Now, when can you use lethal force? Well, the unfortunate reality is if you produce your gun, even brandish it, open your coat and show your gun, much less draw it, much less point it at somebody, and even if you never fire it, just displaying your gun in most states, in every state really, is a felony that can send you to prison. It is either called felony menacing or brandishing. So it's a fine line. Your best protection is to educate yourself before the fact, before an incident happens, as to the law and when you can use lethal force and when you're justified in displaying a weapon to discourage an attack and avoid violence. And believe me, that's what you want to do if at all possible. If there's any opportunity to remove yourself safely and not use violence, not use lethal force, not only does the law require you to do that, it's really your best option. You do not want to face the legal system. I'd almost rather face the armed aggressor than the legal system. Simply expressed, it is, what would a reasonable and prudent man do in the same circumstances? Well, obviously there's some ambiguity here. How do we define reasonable? How do we define prudent? But the key element of the definition of the reasonable man theory is knowing what he knew at the time. That's one of the keys and objectives of this DVD piece. We're going to increase what you knew before a tragic incident or self-defense incident occurs, so that that knowledge that we're giving you in this DVD is then admissible in court. Anything you knew that is relevant before the shooting incident occurred is automatically admissible in court. But anything you learned after the incident is automatically not admissible in court. So we're going to build up your legal defense as well as your tactical thinking by communicating and demonstrating some of the realities of a lethal confrontation. For example, a person 18 feet away can generally pull a knife and close the distance and kill you with that knife before you can draw your gun from concealment and stop him effectively with your handgun. Now, that seems counterintuitive. A district attorney might say, he was 18 feet away. There was 15 feet between you. You had a gun. He just had a knife. Why did you have to shoot him? Well, you'll see in this DV why you might well have to shoot him to save your life. Just how fast a person can close that distance with a knife, and under stress, trying to deploy your gun. Well, it's not like on the range or practicing in your bedroom in front of the mirror. The other element is terminal ballistics. That is, what happens when a bullet hits another human being? Well, it's not like in the movies. First, you don't see any red splash coming out. You probably will not know whether you hit the person attacking you or not. And most incidents, most shooting incidents, according to FBI statistics, occur in dim light. The truth is, a handgun, just about any handgun, is a pretty light weapon for an animal as large as a human being. In the films, we get conditioned to people getting shot, falling down immediately. That is not necessarily what's going to happen. And you have to prepare for your survival between the time that you may mortally wound the person attacking you or your family and the time he actually is incapacitated and is no longer able to fire his gun or use his edged weapon, etc. In the Old West, this was called the dead man's 10, or the 10 seconds the man you just killed has to continue to fire and take you with him. When are we legally justified in using lethal force or potentially lethal force? First thing to appreciate here is there's a narrow margin between when it's legally justified for you to draw your weapon and actually using that weapon. It's a very difficult decision to make. You better prepare yourself psychologically and educate yourself to the law before you make that decision. Here's how the law sees it. One, the threat has to be immediate. In other words, the guy has a knife, he's coming at you, he has a gun, he's coming at you, etc. Okay? The threat has to be immediate. Let's look at a situation that's not immediate. You get in a fight with a guy, you knock him down, he says, "You son of a bitch, I'm going to go home and get my gun and come back here and blow your brains out." You are not justified even in displaying your weapon in most states. You are not justified in shooting him. The threat is not immediate. You can leave the premises, not be there. Two, the threat has to be what I call actionable. In other words, a reasonable man would have to believe the threat the person made, either by his voice, his body carriage, the weapon, how he was moving on you, etc., is actionable. In other words, if a person's in a wheelchair and pulls out a machete and says, "I'll cut your head off, you son of a bitch," well, you're not justified in shooting the man in the wheelchair, because a reasonable man would know that he could outrun the man in the wheelchair and avoid the conflict. So the man, if the person says, for example, "I'll blow your brains out," okay, but you can see both of his hands, the threat is not clearly actionable. So you're not justified in shooting him just because he said, "I'll blow your brains out," no matter how heated he is, no matter what he calls you, or whatever else. Now, if he says, "I'll blow your brains out," and his hand dives in his coat, the threat seems to be immediate. Do you see the gray areas here you'll have to deal with? So we've gone through, the threat has to be immediate, it has to be actionable, that is, he has to have the means to carry it out. Now the third one's a real important one. It has to be otherwise unavoidable. Let's take the man with the knife again. He's 20 feet away. Maybe he's even stabbed somebody. Well, if he stabbed somebody, you are now legally justified in protecting the lives of innocents. You're under no obligation to do so, however. If you're not a sworn police officer, you have no obligation to stop the guy from killing innocent people, if you're not a sworn police officer. So if a person pulled a knife on me, said, "I'll kill you, you bastard," and started running at me, and I'm just about to get in my car, I'm not going to draw my gun and shoot him. I'm going to get in that car, hit the locks, and drive away, because the threat is avoidable. I can avoid it safely by getting in my car and going away. It's not necessary for me to use lethal force. I'm not going to shoot people gratuitously. The legal consequences of shooting someone nowadays, even if the facts seem obvious you acted in your self-defense, with the exception of, in some states, if you're in your own home, are monstrous and very expensive. An important element of when you can display your weapon, or in the worst case scenario, use your weapon to stop an attack and use lethal force, is the concept at law called disparity of force. Okay, let's suppose it's a fender bender. The guy jumps out of the car and says, "You son of a bitch, where'd you get your license? Out of a Cracker Jacks box? Look what you did to my damn car." Now, as a reasonable and prudent man, you should say, "Sir, let's calm down. We both have insurance. There's no problem here. We'll settle it," okay? Try to de-escalate the situation. If he jumped out of that car, even though the veins are pumping out of his neck, he's, "You motherfucker," and he may even be threatening you. You may not be, even if you have a concealed weapons permit and your possession of the weapon is lawful, you may not be, it may not be lawful for you to even display the weapon and say, "I don't want any trouble. Let's hold it right here. We both have insurance." He could go to the police and say, "He pulled a gun on me. He showed a gun. He threatened me with a gun." You might be in some legal trouble there, depending on the state and county and how the law is enforced in your area. On the other hand, he jumps out of the car, the same thing. You tell him, "Keep your distance, sir. We both have insurance. We'll settle this," okay? But then another person steps out of the car and comes around, and they're obviously working in cahoots. As they're friends or they're communicating, they're working it together as a team. Suppose he says something like, "Fuck, let's kick his ass." Well, now there's a disparity of force. At this point, you probably are justified legally pulling back your coat, putting your hand in your gun, and say, "Stop there, I don't want any trouble, stop." Okay? If they don't have any weapons in their hands, it's a reasonable and prudent man might do that, you see. Now, if they have weapons in their hands, there is most clearly a disparity of force. But I'll tell you personally, but then I've been in shooting situations. I may have a higher comfort level, I don't know. Nobody ever gets a real comfort level. But I will, if there's any possibility of my avoiding even displaying my weapon or shooting somebody, I'm going to take it. If there's any reasonable way I can escape without using lethal force, I will do so. But everybody has to make their own judgment, and every circumstance has to be judged on its own merits. But understand this idea of disparity of force. If there's more than one of them, or he has a weapon, there's a disparity of force, and you may be justified in displaying your weapon, drawing it to prevent the attack, to stop the attack, or if necessary, using the weapon to certainly stop the attack as you step off the attack line. Now there's some arbitrary and judgmental things here about disparity of force. Suppose the guy is 6'2", 230 pounds, solid muscle, and he says, "I'm going to pound your face into raspberry jam," and the veins are pumping out and his eyes are bulging out, and you're a 154-pound guy, 5'8". Well, there is a disparity of force there. So you may, and I emphasize may, be justified in displaying your weapon to avoid it. "I don't want any trouble, stay back." Now, when people are adrenalized, don't expect, when people are adrenalized, they don't see everything. He may not see you displaying your weapon, etc. It's unfortunate. Okay, let's look at another thing, though, about this. It ties into the reasonable man theory. Suppose the reasonable man theory says, what would a reasonable and prudent man do, knowing what he knew at the time? Suppose the guy's 6'2", 220, all full of muscle, you're much smaller, but you already knew from reading a newspaper, or you'd actually seen, or you knew this guy, that is, you knew he had beaten some people severely. Hell, maybe he was out on bond. You see what I mean? If you knew he had attacked and beaten other people severely, that would go into your decision-making process. Therefore, if you knew that, you have greater legal justification, perhaps, in drawing your gun and demanding he stop. If you draw your gun on someone charging at you, I suggest you move. Looked at when you can use force in your self-defense. Threat has to be immediate. It has to be actionable. That means a reasonable man will believe the person can carry it out immediately. And it has to be otherwise unavoidable. That is, if you can leave, the law requires you to leave, if you can leave safely. But how much force can you use? What is the amount of legal force you can use in a self-defense situation? This can be summed up easily enough in words, but in the real world it's not that easy. You can only use that amount of force that will neutralize the threat. That is, will save yourself or a loved one and no more. Now, sometimes that means shooting and killing the man before he kills you or your family member or loved one. But let's look at an example of unlawful force. The person is shouting at you, makes all kinds of threats. Let's say it's even a hand-to-hand situation, and to get the principle across. He swings at you, you knock him down. Now he's knocked down and he's getting up. You could leave. You could extract yourself from the situation. The law requires you to do so because you've neutralized the threat. If you continue to pummel the guy or kick him when the threat has been neutralized to you, now you are committing an assault. Let's look at an odd case involving firearms where the amount of force used was not justified at law. Let's say the guy grabs a knife or a bludgeon and says, "I'll fucking bust your brains out." And you shoot him and your bullet hits him in the arm instead of here. The weapon falls from his grasp. He's grabbing his shoulder. If you then shoot him again, that is an assault because you have already neutralized the threat. Now let me tell you, it's going to be very difficult to judge and evaluate these things under the adrenal stress of an actual attack when your life is on the line. What you say at the scene of the incident when the responding officers arrive is critical. It can determine whether you are prosecuted or not prosecuted. You have to, at some point, maybe not at the scene, but you're going to have to justify that you were in fear of your life or gross physical injury. Now, I'm a master of only one thing: avoiding conflict. So I don't think this is going to happen to me. But I will tell you, quite frankly, if I was forced to either use my weapon or even any hand-to-hand violence against an attacker, and he was laying there on the ground and the police arrived, first thing I would say, I thought he was going to kill me. And it would be true if I used violence, you see? I would never use violence unless I actually thought someone was going to kill me or grossly injure me. So it's true. It's a truthful thing to say. I thought he was going to kill me or beat the shit out of me. You know, look at the size of that guy. I saw that knife on his hip. Okay? Or suppose he drew a gun or something you thought was a gun. I would point to that. Look, that's his gun right there. Now, if I had made a mistake and it turned out not to be a gun, well, what counts legally is what was in my mind at the time and what I knew at the time. But the main deal to the responding officer, well, most defense attorneys, almost all of them, will say, don't say anything till I get there to represent you. And the law does not require you to say anything to police at all. Your constitutional Fifth Amendment privilege protects you against self-incrimination. Nor can the prosecutor point out that you took the Fifth Amendment. He can't do that because it's your legal right. He cannot prejudice the jury by mentioning that. The main thing you have to show is a reasonable and prudent man, knowing what he knew at the time, would feel that his life was in danger, the life of some innocent person or loved one, or gross physical injury was at stake. Now let me say this, and this is controversial, but it's the way I feel, and it's personally how if my avoidance strategy failed, and I had to use violence against someone, lethal or even less than that, I know I'm going to have to answer to the law. But the truth is, I would, because of my avoidance and de-escalation strategies and a knowledge of how dangerous the law can be, the law is like, when you go into a courtroom or face a jury, you're spinning a roulette wheel. Okay. Because I know that I can control myself in an adrenalized situation, generally, I would point out immediately to the responding officer why I had to do what I did. I would say, he attacked me, he was going to beat the shit out of me, or he had that knife, he had a gun, he was going to kill me, I thought he was going to shoot me. Then I'd point out any evidence that supports that. There's that knife, there's that gun, that's etc. Then I'd shut up. Your defense attorney wants you to say nothing, because if you say nothing, then you can't damage your case. Let's look at exactly what that defense attorney is worried about and why he tells you, don't say anything till I show up. The hockey dad case. The hockey dad took his kid to the hockey game, practice kids. The hockey coach was allowing high sticking. That's using the other kids using the stick to hit the other players. The hockey dad said, hey, stop that high sticking. The hockey coach said, hey, this is hockey. That wasn't acceptable to Dad. He told his kid, we're getting out of this game, undress, and meet me outside. The hockey dad waited outside, but being adrenalized, time was distorted. It seemed much longer to him as waiting. He went back in to see why his kid had not come out. The hockey coach then attacked him with his ice skates on, kicking him and everything else. The hockey dad hit him, knocked him down, and killed him. Now, even though later in court, the medical expert said the hockey dad had a condition, brain hemorrhage, that was triggered by the blow, and that an ordinary person would not have suffered that death from such a blow, most likely, the hockey dad was convicted and sent to prison, and for one reason only. When the responding officer said to him, you outweigh that guy by 80, 90 pounds. The hockey dad said, hey, I wasn't afraid of him and he wasn't afraid of me. Well, in saying that, if he wasn't in fear of his life, if he wasn't in fear of gross injury, he loses his claim to self-defense. So in those words alone, the hockey dad torpedoed his self-defense claim. But of course, that wasn't in his mind at all. What he was thinking was, it was an even deal. You see, I didn't attack him, he engaged me. So there's a lot to be said for the lawyer telling you don't say anything. Because if you're ever in a really life and death situation where you're in fear of your life or gross physical injury, you're going to be adrenalized. You're not going to be thinking as coherently as you might, and you might very well make these mistakes. All right, forensics have developed into quite an exact science. That's when they collect evidence at the scene of a homicide, okay? And homicides, generally there will be some forensics taken. Never lie to police. Either say nothing or tell them the truth. Don't drag the body inside. That's tampering with evidence. They'll know it and it makes you look guilty. I have to say, don't run away. If you get in a self-defense space and shoot the guy, don't think you're going to run away, get in your car, and nobody will know it was you. If later you're subsequently arrested and they track you down, and it's very likely they will, that will look very bad for a jury. Hey, he ran away from the scene of the crime. He must be guilty. And remember, juries are not impartial. Let's look at choosing your attorney. Well, obviously, if you're being charged with a felony, a crime, you don't want the family lawyer who's a real estate or divorce attorney or whatever else. You want a criminal defense attorney who has experience in successfully defending cases like your own. You're going to have to ask around. You're going to have to ask your family lawyer, who do you recommend and why? And if he hasn't tried at least, I would say 20 cases, felony cases, somewhat similar to yours, and won most of them or better, I don't think, do you want to risk your freedom on his representation? Also, the first person you're going to have to convince that you're not guilty and why is the person you choose as your defense attorney. Because, and my brother is a defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, so I know this is true. Many criminal defense attorneys feel they have never represented an innocent client. So their strategies tend to move around not proving you innocent, not proving their clients couldn't have been the one or didn't do it, but muddying the waters, impeaching testimony, questioning evidence, etc. So the first person you must convince of your innocence is your own attorney. so that he starts to think in terms of, maybe this guy is innocent. How can I prove that to a jury? We're going to take a look at terminal ballistics. That's what happens when a bullet actually strikes a human body. Some years ago, for Paladin Press, Boulder, Colorado, I did a DVD on handgun stopping power. I suggest you buy it too. Quite illuminating. I discovered that hydrostatic shock was one of the main contributors to stopping power in a handgun. Remember, a handgun is a pretty light weapon for an animal as large as a man. Now here, I have the standard 1911 pistol, and I'm using soft point ammunition. Let's see how it affects this watermelon. The human body is mostly water, and of course so is the watermelon. I'm not saying that a watermelon is a adequate simulator for human tissue, but it will show the difference in hydrostatic shock effects between one caliber and another. 1911 45 ACP with soft point self-defense ammunition. You see it just pumps a little hole through there. Let's try it again. Again, I'm using soft point ammunition. Self-defense loads. I'm not saying I wouldn't feel adequately armed with a 45, but let's just take a look at how it compares to other calibers. Again, soft point ammunition, 1911. Again, it just punches holes in the watermelon. Let's take a look at what the .357 Magnum does. We just did the 45 ACP with soft point ammunition. Now with soft point defensive ammunition in the 1911, they kick it up above the 850 feet per second that a standard ball would be going. But it still may not be fast enough to make the ammunition expand, and we saw that it did not expand. Now we're going to fire Smith & Wesson 586 4-inch barrel. I'm going to first fire a standard lead 38 and then a .357 Magnum jacketed hollow point. However, I'm going to put them in correctly so they're indexed, so the 38 comes up first. The first will be a 38 round nose lead, non-expanding bullet. Okay, punched a hole through it. Now from the same weapon, so the only difference in performance can be attributed to the ammunition itself, I'm firing a 158 grain jacketed hollow point .357 Magnum. The difference in hydrostatic shock is self-evident. The greater destruction of the .357 Magnum is due to its higher velocity of 1,350 feet per second, which is fast enough to generate hydrostatic shock, which obliterates the watermelon. You have to have enough velocity to expand an expanding bullet. Expanding bullets do not always expand. In fact, sometimes expanding bullets, the hole can be plugged by, say, the leather of a leather jacket. Then the bullet won't expand. Bullets that do not expand will act like full metal jacket. Now we're going to try the Beretta 92F, now classified as the M9 for military service. I'm using Federal HydroShock soft point ammunition, a primary self-defense load in the 9mm caliber. Seems to perform pretty decently in terms of hydrostatic shock, because it's moving at about 1,150 feet per second, which is just at the threshold of what will make an expanding bullet expand properly. All right, the M9 or Beretta 92F is the standard sidearm of our troops and all NATO troops now. However, they are limited to using full metal jacket ammunition. What we just saw was a Federal Hydra-Shok 115 grain expanding ammunition. As a civilian defending your home, you can use jacketed hollow points. Any police officer in this country using a 92F is using soft point ammunition, expanding ammunition. But let's see how full metal jacket, such as the military is forced to use because of the Geneva Convention, performs on the watermelons. Okay. We do not see the hydrostatic shock from the full metal jacket that obliterates the watermelon and would otherwise damage organs and tissues of the human body not actually touched by the bullet. That is the key concept. There's a tendency to think the larger the bullet, like a .45, the better the stopping power. Well, in general, that is true, but it's not all there is to it. In expanding ammunition that does expand, it is the hydrostatic shock, water being incompressible, that transmits the shock wave to organs and damages them, rupturing organs, exploding a kidney or liver, or rupturing an artery, that the bullet never hit. So if you fire your bullet in ballistic gelatin and it expands larger, it's not the diameter increasing that achieves the greater stopping power. It's the hydrostatic shock wave created by that expansion that creates the greater stopping power. Okay, we've had some fun shooting watermelons. What do you take away from this? First, let me say for you 1911 fans, I have a 1911 of course, and I certainly would not feel underarmed with it. But I'll be straight about it too. I'd feel better with that Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum, because I know my stopping power is greater, more instant. But what did we really learn here? The 9mm has a bad rap primarily because experience in the military where full metal jacket ammunition alone can be used. When we load that 9mm with jacketed hollow points, we get reasonably decent performance. Not as good as the 357 Magnum, of course, but better than even the .45 in ball ammo. And the .45 in soft point ammunition, self-defense ammunition, failed to expand on the watermelon. Now I know what some of you are thinking, well, Peyton, if I'm ever attacked by a watermelon, I'll bear all this in mind. I'm not holding out that a watermelon is a good tissue simulant for human body tissue, but it does show the difference in hydrostatic shock quite graphically and quite undeniably. The .357 Magnum obliterated the watermelon. The .45 in soft point ammunition just punched holes through it. A .38 fired from the Smith & Wesson just punched a hole in the watermelon. From the very same gun, the same Smith & Wesson, a .357 Magnum jacketed hollow point, 158 grain, obliterated the watermelon. The hydrostatic shock ripped it apart from the inside. So it's not just the size of the bullet. It's the bullet design, that is where it's expanding ammunition or hollow point ammunition. For self-defense purposes, you always want to use hollow point ammunition. Every law enforcement officer in this country has his weapon loaded with hollow point or soft point ammunition. Hydrostatic shock appears to be a significant stopping mechanism in expanding ammunition fired from higher velocity rounds. The .45 doesn't quite generate enough velocity with a 230 grain bullet to expand and cause that hydrostatic shock wave to damage structures that are not hit by the bullet. But in my own home, where concealment is not an issue, a handgun's pretty light weapon. The short-barreled shotgun is the recommended weapon for home defense, and it'll do the job almost every time. Let me add another critical thing here, and that's the effects of adrenal stress. What would the reasonable and prudent man do? Well, when's it justified to use violence or lethal force, or any level of violence and force? When you are in fear of your life or gross physical injury. Think about that. If you are in fear of your life or gross physical injury, there's no question whatsoever that you will have the adrenal flow through your body. And I've been watching it for many years, training people here at Ramcat. Here's what happens. First thing, loss of motor control. That means controlling your muscles, especially fine motor control. So you may be quick on the draw or breaking leather, but under stress can you do that? That's what's missing in most training too. 2, tunnel vision. You tend to tunnel in. The person draws a weapon, all you see is the weapon. Some detectives who were investigating an armed robbery that I was involved at my liquor store, when I described the gun and the people, they looked at me weird. And I said, what? And they said, well, most people just say, when we ask them what kind of gun was it, they say, it was the biggest gun I ever saw, because they tunneled into it. Auditory exclusion. Your hearing shuts off so that your visual cortex can process seeing faster. That's why police say, I felt the gun buck in my hand, but I don't know how many shots I fired. The point is, you will be adrenalized if you're in fear of your life, and that is going to impair your performance unless you've had some sort of training under adrenal stress. Let's talk about this myth of the power of handguns. Well, in general, a handgun will not stop a person instantly. That is, stop his ability to attack with a single shot. In my research of handgun stopping power, I talked with Dr. Lenny Spivak. He was the main surgeon, emergency room trauma surgeon, and in Newark, New Jersey, which he called the Gun and Knife Club. And he told me he had dealt with hundreds of gunshot wound victims, and that the only place a single shot from a handgun could stop a person such that he could not continue his attack was if the bullet entered the brain case or ruptured the left ventricle of the heart. The only two places where a single handgun bullet would immediately stop the attack and the danger to your life. Well, that comes down to bullet placement, the factor we have the least control over, especially in an adrenalized actual self-defense situation. You may be able to hit a person, a silhouette, a paper target between the eyes or in the heart, in the comfort of the well-lit pistol range booth, using the sights of your weapon, squeezing carefully with breath control. Those things are not going to be possible under adrenal stress in an actual shooting situation where your life is at stake. And that's the only time you're legally justified in using your gun, when you are in fear of your life, so you can bet you will be adrenalized. Now, what does this mean to you in terms of the law and reasonable man theory? The district attorney is going to try to make it look like you emptied every round in your gun into that man. He was 10 feet away or 15 feet away or 20 feet away, and he just had a baseball bat or a knife or a tire iron, and you shot him 8, 9, 12 times. Was that really necessary? He's going to try to make it look like your legitimate self-defense went beyond that and went to assault. But you now know that handgun bullets do not instantly stop a person. In fact, as I said, Dr. Spivak, you can't get a better source than this, a more authoritative expert witness than Dr. Spivak. Only a bullet enters the brain case or ruptures the left aorta of the heart, the left chamber of the heart, thus dropping the blood pressure immediately, will stop a person immediately, such that they cannot continue the attack. Now, personally, I know I'm not going to use a weapon on a person, a handgun, unless my life is in danger, my family's in danger, perhaps another innocent person. But I know one shot is probably not going to be enough. And I'm going to continue to fire until the threat is neutralized. Not beyond that, but I'm going to continue to fire until I know the person can no longer attack me or kill me or my wife or whatever. And if I stop firing, I'm going to take cover, because he could come back to life. I've seen police video of people shot, jump back up, continue the attack. Once is not enough. My guess is that many of you watching this video are concealed weapon permit holders. That means you have a responsibility to learn how to use your gun accurately. You probably go to the range a lot. But the fact is, this might work against you if you're involved in a shooting incident, a self-defense situation, because the DA may try to twist it up like this. You're a gun nut, 1. 2, here's your target you keep in your office. At 50 feet, you fired a 2.5-inch group. Why couldn't you shoot that man in the leg or the arm and wound him and stop him? You can shoot that accurately. Why did you have to shoot him 6 or 7 times in the chest? Well, first, you now know why one shot will generally not stop a person's attack before he can continue his attack and kill you. But I will also tell you this. Under adrenal stress, and it's involuntary and it's not the same as fear, under adrenal stress, you will not be able to shoot with the precision you do in the shooting booth on a paper target. You will not have the luxury of trying to shoot him in the leg or the arm. All right. As a matter of fact, you probably will not be able to use the sights of the pistol at all. Let's take a look at some scenarios we do here in Colorado in our Ramcat training.
All right, motherfucker, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Give us your fucking money now.
Get back. Drop your weapon.
All right. We ready? We're rolling.
Who's that?
What's up, man?
How's it going?
Good. I noticed you fucking looking at me, you know.
I don't want any trouble, man.
Sure? You don't
Keep
have
your
a fucking
distance.
problem with me?
Keep your distance.
Huh?
I don't want any trouble.
I'm dead.
A little slow in the draw there, buddy. All right, you see how the flash and the noise?
That hand didn't stop the bullet?
Wonder Woman.
You know, as soon as you heard somebody yell, "They're all gonna die," and then I shut. Well, that should have. That's the orange alert. You should have thrown your coat back, you know, so you can get your gun. And then, when I shot him, you should have shot me immediately. But it's okay. I mean, if we did it all right the first time, what would be the point in being here? All right, next.
I got pee.
If you want to be a member of this club, you got to make your bones. Kill him. You got a gun. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. Back off. Okay. Back off. All right.
Shoot him.
Good. All right.
Take the rock.
Good thing you have that 18 shooter.
Now,
Good
did you
thing you
use
had
the
that
sights
18
of the
shooter.
gun? Do you think you could have used the sights?
Doesn't even come to mind.
Exactly. So think about all that shooting at paper targets and little bullets.
All right. There's something I ask almost everyone when they come off one of these scenarios. I ask them, did you use the sights of the pistol? I have yet to have anybody respond, yes, I did. They look at me quizzically and say things like, it didn't even occur to me, or I didn't know the pistol had sights. Because the scenarios engage the adrenal response. So it's very difficult, if at all possible, to use the sights in a real self-defense situation. You will also might have low light, etc. Here's where it comes home for you. Knowing this, if you're involved in a shooting incident and in the deposition, before you go to trial, they're collecting facts and information. The DA is saying, well, you're a great marksman. You could have shot him in the leg. You could have wounded him. You didn't have to shoot him 5 times in the center of mass. You will know, and you can respond, that no, it's one thing shooting paper targets in a well-lighted booth using sights. It's quite another thing when the person's trying to kill you. The adrenal flush hits you. You lose your motor control. You have your tunnel vision. You can't shoot with precision. And in general, you can't use the sights at all. We've explained that the DA is not allowed to make decisions about your guilt or innocence. In fact, his only job is to prosecute you and convict you, either with a plea bargain or with a jury. Okay, one of the things, he'll try to twist every bit of evidence against you. One of the things I want to point out, really, some of you may be hand loaders. Do not use your hand loads in your own gun that you use for self-defense purposes. That will most certainly mark you as a gun nut and a person who got his concealed weapons permit thinking of it as a hunting license. You use the same ammunition that your local or state police use. So in that deposition, when the assistant district attorney says, and you loaded that weapon with the most deadly ammunition possible that tears the guts out of another human being, isn't that true? You say, no, sir. I loaded my pistol with the same ammunition our state police use, and for the same reason. Again, how do we define the reasonable man theory at law? What would a reasonable and prudent man, knowing what he knew at the time, do? Well, there's an old saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. We're going to see if that's true. You may think a person 15 or 20 feet away who draws a knife on you when you are carrying a pistol, CCW possessor, is not much of a danger to you. We're going to see that that's perhaps not the case at all, and that will contribute to your legal defense. Now, let me point this out. One, in these Ramcat scenarios, we've given the attendant, the person who's defending himself, an almost quick draw cowboy holster. You won't have that in the real world. Two, it's in a well-lit area, the dojo, that has no obstacles to trip over. But most important of all, these people are perceptually ready. They know the person is going to try to close the distance, draw the knife, and stab them before they can draw their weapon and shoot them and stop them and survive. Let's take a look at how they do.
I was expecting the conversation. He wanted to be taken
First zombie.
Hey, I need to get the bus stop. Can you I just need like $3.75.
Come on, you change, man. All I carry is a debit card.
Come on, man. You look like a pretty wealthy guy. I just need.
I don't carry any money, man. All I carry is a debit card.
All right, man.
All right. Okay. All right. Gee, that wasn't fair.
Fuckers. Kill that fucking bitch. What the fuck you looking at?
Hey, I'm not looking for any trouble, but just keep your distance.
Huh?
Just keep your
Fucking
distance.
look at me!
That's real training. That is real training.
That's not the
Boy as it gets.
Oh no.
What's up, brother?
Not much.
Hey, I need a couple bucks.
Can't help you, man.
Yeah, you can. Give me some fucking money. Give me some fucking money. Give me the money or I'll fucking pound it out of you. You fucking hear me? Huh?
I'm dead.
Okay, what did we just see? What did you just see? You saw that a person 15, 20 feet away could close the distance with a knife and stab the defender before that person could generally draw a pistol and stop him. Let's review the conditions under which this Ramcat drill was done. One, the person had a holster that was virtually a quick draw Wild West holster. There was no retention strap on it, etc. Now, what are you carrying? How do you carry your weapon? Is it in a fanny pack, cross draw, whatever? Certainly, it's not going to be nearly as fast as the holster rig we gave the people in the experiment. Two, is it going to be a well-illuminated flat space like the dojo where we did this experiment, this drill? No, it's more likely to occur outside, on the street at night when you're attacked. There can be things, you may not see his weapon. It won't be a well-illuminated spot. He could be even further away than 20 feet, and because it's not well lit, you could not determine that he was attacking you with the knife even beyond a distance of 20 feet. All right? Three, is it going to be flat, open, smooth, nothing to trip over area like this mat? No. There might be curbs, automobiles, etc., things you can crash into, obstacles. But the most important thing is number four. They were perceptually ready for a guy to try to close the distance and stab them with a rubber knife. And they knew their job was to get the gun out and shoot to stop the attacker. They were perceptually ready for it. Well, you certainly are not going to be as perceptually ready for it as these people were. So we gave them in the experiment, the drill here, the best possible chance to get their gun out and stop the attacker. And yet from 15 or 20 feet, very few of the people actually were able to stop the attacker. Now, because they couldn't get their gun out fast enough. Now, what's the significance of this? It comes back to the reasonable man theory at law again. What would a reasonable man do, a reasonable and prudent man, knowing what he knew at the time? Well, now you've added to your knowledge base. You know that a person 15, 20 feet away with an edged weapon, and that could include a baseball bat too, a bludgeon weapon, contact weapon, can close that distance remarkably quickly and often before you can get your gun out. And if you are ever in that gravest extreme where you have to use lethal force, you are going to confront the law. And one of the first things that's going to be done in the presence of your attorney is a deposition, asking you what happened and why you did what you did. At that point, early in the investigation, it'll come out that you knew that a person 15 or 20 feet away could close the distance. It was something you knew at the time before the incident happened. That makes it admissible in court. It makes you less attractive to prosecute.
As you can see from watching this DVD, protecting yourself and those that you love is about much more than just getting your shots in a tight shot group and being a quick draw. It's about what you do before, during, and after a potentially lethal encounter and keeping yourself out of prison. Now, in order to respond to this type of situation, there are several other factors you're going to have to take into account. One of those that's been mentioned periodically throughout this DVD is the adrenaline factor. That when you're in fight or flight mode, when your system says that you experience danger and potentially your life or somebody else's life could be threatened, you're going to get that adrenaline flowing through your body. That's going to impact your judgment call at the time. It's going to impact your judgment and how you deal with the situation to try to avoid it. It's going to deal with what you can do during an encounter, whether using hand-to-hand or using your weapon. It's going to affect how quick of a draw you are, how great of a shot you are. It's going to affect everything, and it's also going to affect how you respond to the officer that shows up on the scene. That adrenaline factor is often missing from other training programs, from many different training programs that you probably tried in the past that have you working in a relaxed atmosphere. Perhaps you're in a martial arts situation, you go to martial arts classes. Do they deal with the adrenaline factor there? If you've ever been into a firearms course, is it aim shooting where you're looking at pointing your gun at a paper target rather than having somebody actually shoot at you at the same time, and the adrenaline factor is going? And then again, when you respond to an officer that shows up on the scene and you're jittery, are you going to say the right things? The thing is, you can't escape the adrenaline factor in your own survival program. You have to learn how to deal with it. For us, we took an inner circle group from our ISCQC members, the International Society of Close Quarter Combatants, and we all traveled here to the Ramcat training facility that specializes in adrenal stress training from the standpoint of dealing with the situation to avoid it, be able to go hand to hand with an assailant, and using that power of the adrenaline, and also how to use a firearm under the adrenaline factor as well, when you actually have somebody a live person you need to point at and actually know when and how to pull that trigger. The Ramcat training facility is located in Colorado, and it's long been heralded as the most realistic training you can possibly find when it comes to an encounter that you actually have to make a logical decision that's going to keep you legally in defending yourself and your family for survivability. You can't find any more realistic training out there that I've ever seen before in my career. So I highly recommend you check out the Ramcat training facility. This DVD is just a taste of what you get, but this DVD alone, as you can see, is going to already bolster what you know into that reasonable man theory, because you now have the knowledge. The next level is to test that knowledge. By coming to the Ramcat training facility, and I know this is a shameless plug and there's a reason for that, I believe in this type of training. You have knowledge from this DVD, but when you put it into action and you actually have a live person, it increases your chances from here to here when it comes to your legal justification, because now not only do you have the knowledge, but you have the practice to go along with it. You'll make better decisions that will keep you out of court, and should you ever have to go to court, you have so much more knowledge that you can put on the stand as admissible evidence of what you've experienced, of what you've trained in, and why you logically and reasonably and prudently chose to defend yourself and those that you love. Check out the Ramcat training facility now and look for their next scheduled training event. It's the best training that you're going to be able to get.